I've always heard how yoga is relaxing. So, with my best intentions, I showed up at a class, ready to zen out, but things didn't exactly go according to plan. First, I couldn't even sit cross-legged without looking like a pretzel that had given up. Then, when it came to the downward dog, I accidentally kicked the person next to me in the face. Not to mention, my meditative breathing was more like hyperventilation. By the end of the class, the instructor politely asked me to leave after I caused a minor disruption. Spoiler, it was completely my fault. This video is the comedic tale of how my dream of inner peace turned into an epic fail. Welcome to my channel where I share stories of my life as a hormonal guy who has no idea what he is doing. My first yoga class was actually the result of my wife accusing me of having zero flexibility, and then calling me a human pretzel. The thing is, I love pretzels, so I took it as an insult. "Hey," I said to her while we were eating Triscuits for dinner, "you're the one who's inflexible because you won't try yoga with me." She just gave me a look that said, "Are you kidding? You want to do downward dog?" She didn't need to say anything because I could read her mind. "You clearly have no idea what you're doing, but since you think you're so flexible, why don't you just go ahead and sign yourself up?" So the next day I did. Only problem was that when I got there, I realized I had signed up for a beginner class, which was a little intimidating, because everyone else looked like they knew what they were doing. There was this one woman who was balancing on her hands and feet like she was trying to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich on the ceiling. Another guy was bending himself in half and somehow had a smile on his face. And the last thing I saw before I walked in was my instructor, who seemed to be left. After I awkwardly sat down and took off my shoes, I felt someone staring at me, and when I turned around, the woman who was about to eat the sky smiled and gave me a nice welcoming namaste, I replied, feeling like an outsider who had just walked into a secret society whose sole purpose was to make me feel inadequate. The first few minutes were spent in silence while everyone else meditated. Now, usually I enjoy meditating because it gives me a chance to ignore the world around me. But this time, I couldn't get comfortable. I tried closing my eyes, but all I saw were flashes of light from the window blinds. I tried counting backward from 100, but I kept getting distracted by wondering if the people who lived above us had a really active sex life. I tried focusing on my breath, but every time I breathed in, my shirt rode up, which made me uncomfortable. And it was until about 20 minutes in that I realized that I was the only one in the room who was unmeditating. Everyone else had reached some level of inner peace or blissful nothingness. I, on the other hand, was having what the yogis call a monkey mind, which basically means your brain won't shut up. Then the instructor started speaking in a very calm voice and said, "All right, now we're going to start with a child's pose." Now, being a complete novice, I was unsure if you had to put your hands together like you're re-praying or in front of you like you're redoing push. So I just kind of put them in the praying position, sat back on my heels and put my forehead on the ground. As soon as I did, I realized that I had forgotten to loosen up my pants because they were digging into my ankles and I couldn't get comfortable. I considered moving into a more comfortable position, but then the instructor said, "Hold this pose for as long as you can." So I decided to suffer in silence. Literally seconds went by and I was already uncomfortable. But then she said, "Now breathe deeply." Now I'm a pretty sensitive guy, and whenever I do yoga, stretch, or any kind of physical activity for that matter, I have to go to the bathroom afterwards. So I tried my best to hold it as long as I could. Unfortunately, I couldn't hold my pee for much longer than I could hold the child's pose. So after a few more seconds, I quietly stood up and ran to the bathroom before anyone noticed. When I came back, everyone had moved on to standing up and putting their hands in weird places. Now, being the dummy that I am, I thought I needed to be in the exact same pose as everyone else, which meant that I had to shove my hands into places that they weren't supposed to go. At first, I felt a satisfying pop in my shoulders, but then my elbow buckled and I almost face-planted. When I finally got myself upright, I realized I was holding on to the person next to me for dear life. She looked over at me and said, "Don't worry, just relax and breathe." I felt terrible because I knew that I had almost crushed her to death, but I didn't know what else to do. Next up was the infamous downward dog. And when I tell you I messed this up, I mean I triple dog, quadruped, whatever you call it, messed it up. I think I know the downward dog pose because I've seen it in movies. You put your hands on the ground, kick your feet back, and lift your hips up. Easy, except when I tried to do it. My foot stayed firmly planted on the ground. I tried kicking again, but I accidentally kicked the girl next to me right in the face. She ended up with a shiner, and I ended up with a lecture about personal space. I apologized, but she just told me to focus on my breathing, so I did. Now normally I'm pretty good at breathing. I mean, I've been doing it for years. But in yoga, breathing isn't normal. You have to do it in a certain way. And for some reason, my brain didn't understand this. Instead of meditative breathing, I was doing what's called hyena breathing. I was making loud snorting noises and gasping for air. Everyone was starting to stare at me, and I knew that something was wrong, but I couldn't control it. It was as if my body was possessed by the evil spirit of asthma. And then the instructor stopped the class and said, Okay, let us all move to the side and turn to the person next to you and say 3 things you appreciate about them. The whole class stared at me, and I could tell they were thinking, why does he stink? Is he supposed to be here? Why can't we meditate in silence? I tried to come up with a nice message for the girl next to me who had taken the full force of my downward dog kick, but nothing was coming to mind. All I could think of was get away from me. Then she leaned in and whispered, just be honest. So I did. I said, I appreciate that you're better at yoga than me. I appreciate that you're not judging me for kicking you in the face. And I appreciate that you seem like a really nice person despite the fact that you were sitting next to someone who was breaking all the rules. She laughed and said, no judgment here. Just remember to breathe. But I couldn't stop myself. Next up was the cobra pose, which requires you to lay on the ground with your hands under your shoulders. Raise your head and chest off the ground and look straight ahead. I got the first part right, but when I tried to raise my head, I accidentally inhaled sharply. Everyone stared at me again, and I quickly dropped down and hoped nobody noticed. They did, and the instructor said, remember, gentle movements and deep breathing. Then she added, for the next exercise, we're going to be partners, so please find someone to work with. I thought my luck had changed when I found a couple who was willing to let me join them. Unfortunately, they didn't know that I was a klutz, and the exercise required a lot of trust. Basically, you grab onto the wrists of the 2 people in front of you, and they spin around while you try to keep your balance. Well, I tried my best, but I ended up stumbling all over the place. Then I grabbed onto someone else's ankle, tripped, and knocked over a stack of mats. At this point, I was sweating bullets, and I could feel everyone staring at me. And that's when the instructor approached me and said, Nay, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think you're going to be better off practicing on your own. She was smiling, but I could tell she was trying to be nice. I thanked her for understanding and slowly packed up my things. On my way out, I passed the couple I had just been working with, and I asked them how it went. The husband looked at me and said, I'm never going to trust a man with a name like yours ever again. His wife nodded in agreement. I waved goodbye to the class and stepped outside. I had failed at yoga, kicked a girl in the face, made a complete fool of myself, and ruined the zen of everyone around me. I thought about all the times I had laughed at my wife for doing downward dog, and suddenly, those laughs didn't sound so funny anymore. So the next day, I did it again.